Hi, everyone. And today we're going to be doing the Menendez brothers. This is what we're doing. So, yeah, we're going to be splitting this into, I think, this is one full episode. So, yeah. So, this is going to be split. We're still splitting it into two. We're going to be doing pretty much up until the I think we're gonna probably make it to the end of the first trial. That is what I'm thinking of doing. And then we will finish up the second half. And I will also have some news reports at the end of the second episode, which will be released next week. So that's what we're going to be doing. Let's jump in to this. So again, this is true crime. So just a fair warning. We're talking about murder. So let's get into it. So we start off with Lyle. He's making a phone call to the police about their parents. Again, something I think we've all heard quite a bit where sounds very frantic and all of that. So we have Erik and Lyle here with us. You're going to be talking us through this documentary. They are now 51 and 55 respectively. Both are calling from the same prison. And I smiled just because we will talk about it towards the end, which will be next week. But they were separated for a really, really long time. So I love that they're together. You'll see where I stand very quickly. So they have been incarcerated now for 34 years at the time of the recording. So we learn about Beverly Hills a little bit, and we know money, 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 money. This is Beverly Hills. And this is where the murder will happen. So August 21st, 1989 is when the murder happened, the date of the murder happened. So Jose and Kitty Menendez were found inside of their home in I think it's like the den or TV room. They say, which again, if anyone has seen the series that was done by Ryan Murphy, this sent me while watching it because I'm like, oh God. The back of Jose's head was blown off. And the ADA, who, this bitch, but she heard through the grapevine, I guess, that his brain fell out. If true, fuck. I mean, in case no one knows, they were both shot with shotguns. So I guess like this is possible because it's such a force, but the visual, god damn it. They mentioned that all of the shotgun shells were gone. They were, I guess, if they were picked up. I understand why the brothers did that, obviously to hide their tracks, but stupid because if people are coming in, gangs or whatever, are coming in and shooting these two people, they're not going to pick up the shotgun shells. They're just not. So, I don't know. So Lyle and Erik were 22 and 19, again, respectfully, at the time at the time, and they were the ones that found the bodies, they said. And the police said that they were a little bit of an overactor, but they did not suspect them initially, which, I mean, overacting, sure. I mean, I feel like no one really knows how one will act when they find their parents dead. But Lyle says we had, gunshot residue on our hands. Of course they did. They shot these shotguns, so of course they had gun residue. And they said if it took one test, if they were to have done one test, they it would have been done right there and then. So they didn't test them for anything. Lyle also says that his car was within the search area. And if they searched his gun, which they really show this again in the series, if they searched the air, like searched the entire area, including his car, the shotguns were in the trunk, they would have found those. And they would have probably been able to find out that these are them. And again, just to preface, we will never see the murder weapons because they've never been able to find them. So he said if they looked, they would have found the guns. If they questioned me more, I would have cracked under the pressure. And they didn't. Erik was interviewed and he says, I went into the family room because the TV was on. It wasn't loud, which is interesting. So then why would you go into the room then? Because it's like, what is making you go into the room? You said you heard the TV on, but it wasn't loud. So then would you go in there? Like, I don't know how late it was, but like, why? And he's like, he's also mentioned I didn't touch the TV. And this was the nail in the coffin for these two, is he says there was smoke in the room. What they'll say, which I'm going to mention it now. I don't know if it gets mentioned later. Smoke in the room. If these murders had happened even half an hour before, there would have still been smoke in the room. The only way you're going to know there's smoke in the room is if you were in there when the guns were fired. And then there will be smoke in the room. Because again, these are shotguns. They're going to have smoke. I don't know. 2 months later, a reporter interviews them in the same house, he says. And he's like, their demeanor was weird. They were smiling. They were laughing in the same place where their parents were killed 2 months prior. That's weird. That's suspicious. Erik says he didn't have a lot of coping mechanisms from childhood, which I can believe based on what we're going to hear later. I can believe they didn't have a lot of coping mechanisms. I can also believe these are two young guys who haven't encountered something like this. Let's just say, for argument's sake, they were not the killers. They never would have had to deal with something like this. This is new for them. So the reporter says that Lyle did most of the talking, and he went as far as to say, we should write a book about their father. This is Lyle saying this. Carry on the legacy, which is a weird thing to say for what's to come next. And he continues on to say that they wanted to continue doing the things that he wanted, that Jose wanted. Lyle says, we just kept a lie. We never should have done that interview or done any interviews. Yeah, I would say. At the funeral, and I'm telling you, Ryan Murphy did them dirty with the series at this point where they're like, he's reciting Milli Vanilli, which they never mention, which I probably never happened. But that's some dirty work there, seriously. Anyways, at the funeral, people thought Lyle was, being cool, calm, kind of demeanor. That Lyle also maybe became like his father in a way because, well, he is the oldest. He thinks that maybe he needs to become the quote unquote rock. I don't know. Then the shopping. The other nail in their coffin. Cars. Rolexes. Basically spending it like water. Erik bought a tennis coach because let's keep the tennis thing going. Erik says, I wasn't having a good time, which I can 1,000% believe. Shopping can be seen as therapy, right? So why not for these two boys as well? He said I was covering up the pain. He says the only thing stopping him from, trigger warning, killing himself was if he did if he did actually go through with it, he would basically be complete failure to his father, which is like, okay, again, I believe him. Of course I do. But I question that would be a complete failure, but not killing your father would have not been a complete failure. I'm just, what? Again, I understand though. I get what's going on here. When they started spending the money, the police say, could that have been a motive? Is the inheritance a motive for them? And of course, they're going to hold on to it. I'm going to hold on to my thoughts until we get a little further through this. They needed to find the weapon, the police say, something that was concrete. They needed that murder weapon so they could have obviously done ballistics to find out if this is it. March 8th, 1990, so just about what, 6, 7 months after the murders, or 7 months. There we go. An arrest warrant was then issued against both brothers. For Lyle, the he feels like it was like a staged arrest because the media would have been able to were there, and they would have been able to say like, the here it is. But he says it did feel like a relief also to be arrested. Of course, it's going to feel like a relief because they feel like they have to continue on this, you know, hide everything, not say anything. So this is like finally, it's over. You know, Erik was out of the country on a tennis tournament, and he would then be arrested at the airport because he basically he had to dip out. I think he was in Israel. He had to dip out, and as soon as he landed in LA, he was arrested. Their family was on their side. They didn't believe that they would have done this. Um, I mean, hell, even after it was pretty much confirmed, okay, yeah, we did this, they were still on their side for the most part. Then we are at the first trial. This was the first trial that was being televised. OJ who was basically what they wanted to say. More on OJ later. On this new little network they were calling Court TV. I mean, what a novelty. Leslie Abramson was the counsel for Erik. This ADA bitch is like, if I told you how I really felt about her, I would probably get sued. What do you mean? That she is fantastic at her job? Because let's face it, she was fantastic at her job. She didn't win the trial, but she didn't lose either. And the only way that the prosecution was able to win was leaving things out. Like that, I'm just saying. She's like, I think she lost her money. I mean, I don't want to lose my house, so no one asked you. Jill Lansing was Lyle's attorney. So the judge who's overseeing their case was also a part of the Rodney King case. Now, I have probably talked about this guy before. Me and my co-host on my other podcast actually talked about the Rodney King case last year. I'll link it in the show notes if you are curious to learn about that, because it's a doozy. So the prosecution case was about the money. The reason they killed their parents was for the money. It's I would understand that. Honestly, I thought the same before I really knew the depths of this case, that it was all about the money, because who goes on a shopping spree like this mere months after the death of your parents and you're the one who killed them? Totally get it. I'm with you. Defense said this happened due to the fear that both Jose and Kitty Menendez. So he would beat them. And on top of that, Kitty ends up finding out that Jose has been cheating on her for 8 years. Now, the series shows that he's cheating not only on her with women, but also men. Don't know if that's true. She would end up leaving suicide notes instead of, I mean, I don't know if she ever confronted him about the cheating, or ultimately leaving him because of it. Because I think her existence was Jose. She'd also threatened to poison the entire family. So this is kind of the atmosphere that the boys are, or the brothers, I should say, they're not boys anymore, but the brothers would be dealing with. So we kind of get a little bit of back history on both of the parents. So 1944 in Havana, Cuba is where Jose was born. He was born into a wealthy family, but would end up losing it all during the revolution in Cuba. They would end up leaving and moving to the States as refugees. Then we hear more about Kitty, where they must say that she was fun, she was exotic, she was beautiful. And he married into this white family, which maybe that was strategic. We'll never know. Then Jose is kind of blowing up with these businesses, one of them being Hertz. We've all heard of Hertz. And there's also, we see Hertz, we see the commercial for Hertz, and O.J. Simpson was, if not one of the faces of Hertz. That will come back later. He also becomes the head of RSA, which is a recording studio or business or whatever. And he's working with artists like Hall and Oates. Hall and frickin' Oates? Really? Kenny Rogers, may he rest. And Menudo, aka this is where Ricky Martin's start is from. So back to the trial. The star witness of this trial is making his way in. So we hear about this history of Erik having to go to a therapist after he committed burglaries in the area. This was court ordered. He started going back to him after all that was said and done, goes back to him after the murders occurred because he was having, as he mentioned early on, suicidal ideations. He started, and the therapist, his name is Jerome Oziel. And I don't put doctor in front of that because what this man is about to do is just unethical. Erik went back because of his suicidal ideations, as I mentioned, and it was during a session that Erik says, "So yeah, we did it," meaning we killed our parents. He says Jose was controlling. We're kind of hearing from him in this case. Was controlling. Because again, they kind of show this in the series as well. Jose really stick handled the entire thing. We're going to hear more about that in a minute. Kitty was only ever involved because one, she would be a witness. Two, she would have been miserable, or sorry, she was a victim of the murder. And three, it was like euthanasia type thing, which, I don't, I mean, even if she's having suicidal ideations herself, it is not up to them to do that. Also, they're afraid. It, I don't even know. Ugh. So Oziel says, okay, let's get Lyle here. No, let's get Lyle into all this. His plan was to let this be on tape. He was trying to get this recorded. Which is not the least smartest thing to do. But of course, these tapes will never be admitted into trial ever, so there's that part. When Lyle got there, he was very upset about Erik saying anything. He apparently was being threatening. This is Oziel saying this. Do I think there's a place where that's true? Absolutely. Um, but again, which was never ever said in real life, the series doesn't help those things when you're seeing, oh, Lyle and Erik discussing murdering Oziel. Whether they were going to, we'll never know. Is it crazy that the potentially couldn't have happened. It's not crazy, but we'll never know. It's just accusations at this point. Lyle explains, listen, I was upset because Oziel wasn't trustworthy. He explains when Erik had to first go to him, Jose made Oziel sign a document saying he would tell Jose everything that took place in the sessions. That is why I will not call him Dr. Oziel. That's against therapist client confidentiality. I think at this point, Erik was an adult, if not an adult. Um, past the age of consent, you know? Uh, so then we hear from Jenna Lon Smith, who is Oziel's girlfriend. So he is a married man. So she ends up going forward because she claims that Oziel raped her. Who knows? Apparently, he also drugged her, kidnapped her, and forced her to stay in his home. Now, there's conflicting things there. She says he did that. He says she forced herself in. Either way, I have questions for the wife. So, anyways, then Oziel apparently was losing his license, and this ADA bitch is like, can we wait a couple weeks? Because obviously, if he loses his license, he's no longer a credible witness. She wanted those tapes, but they didn't get those until the end of the trial, which I don't know how that would have gone, if it would have been a nail in their coffin or would have just, it still would have made a mistrial happen. I don't know. We'll never know. Then there was talks that they tried to escape Lyle and Erik. Lyle had apparently written a letter to Erik. At the end, he wrote, "Destroy this," which Erik did not. It was ended up being found in his cell under his bed. And he basically confessed to the murders in this note. I think Lyle did. But turns out, oops, they never actually tried to escape. There was no talks of that. It was just a way, I guess, for them to communicate with each other, because I think they were in different cell blocks. They weren't with each other unless it was at the trial. Then we hear from Dr. William Vickery, who's the defense expert. When he interviewed Erik, he concluded he was very depressed. He's also being very guarded. Erik says he didn't know who to trust. This is why he's being a little guarded. Because Lyle would say trust no one. Because obviously their experiences with Oziel didn't end well. Lyle says, I would have rather lost the trial than talk about what really happened in this home. John Conti, who was another defense expert, this one for Lyle, they did suspect that there was sexual abuse going on. So then we hear from a cousin who's going to kind of corroborate this. She says, Jose apparently sat Lyle on a counter and says, jump off and I'll catch you. Again, he's like 5. When Lyle did, Jose stepped back and just let him fall. Someone else says, Jose would close fist punch Lyle. And again, he is 5. Prosecution cannot find one single character witness for the parents, which is very freaking telling. It's very telling. We are having character witnesses for both Lyle and Erik, who are the murderers in this case, but nothing for the victims. And all that this ADA bitch can say is, well, clearly he's an awful man. He raised 2 murderers, so there you go. Wow, okay. Maybe. But did it ever occur to anybody that people will kill in order to preserve their life, save their life, do whatever, especially when they live in a toxic situation? Anyways, Erik would be lifted up while holding a bar, and he would see how long he could hold on. Basically, this is torture. But of course, he would cry, and Jose would just yell at him. They show a picture of him holding a bar, and he was 2 years old in that picture. Then we hear from the great Anne Burgess. If you want to hear more, me and Mikkel actually did a episode on Anne Burgess. I'll link it in the show notes. Back in Women's History Month, so I'll link that. She interviewed them. She said there are signs of sexual abuse. She says Erik said 10 seconds after he murdered them that he regretted it. He says he mostly regretted his mom, which I definitely can understand that. Maybe we could have talked to her. He says he wanted to be loved by her. Unfortunately, I think there was a lot of mental illness with her where she probably needed to seek therapy or some sort of mental health help that maybe she could have gotten there. Unfortunately, she would never be given that chance. So, um, he wanted to, yeah, I want to be with her. His father, he says, is just a little tougher. He says he was rarely attached to them. He was their abuser. Then we hear from Anne Burgess again. She had Erik draw the week prior to the crime. She says his drawings were quite dark and very twisted. She ends up going to Leslie Aberson to say something else is going on here. Like there's more to this. Erik said he started trusting Dr. Vickery, which is very helpful. Because of him and Dr. Burgess, he says Erik started to open up. Lyle testifies at the trial. He says he didn't want to do it, the testifying. He did things to make his father happy because he wanted his love, which of course, I think any victim of any kind of abuse is going to do things in order to make them happy, even if they know it's probably not going to make them happy. And then he says his father started sexually abusing him when he was around 5 or 6 years old. He says he will not repeat the things he said, but it was very horrific. Lyle told his mom, and she just said, stop it. Stop exaggerating. He has to punish you. Which again, as a little boy, you're thinking, oh, this is how punishment is. This is what you do when you're bad. Is that I have these things being done to me. When that's not her advice. If your child is coming to you, especially at that age, saying certain things, believe them. Anyway, he then unfortunately sexually molests Erik. Because again, this is all he knows. This is all he's been shown. And he does apologize to Erik on the stand, which was, it's really powerful. One of the jurors say, we all had tears in our eyes watching this. The stupid ADA bitch says in that moment, oh, I said, oh shit. At that time, she would say, people who are abused don't always kill their parents. True. That is true. They don't. But not everyone's going to process things the same way either. Then Erik is on the stand and he says he's really struggling with the mic. We see this. It's even over dramatized in the series. In 1989, he says he was being raped by his father. So the same year that they're being killed, he is 19. It didn't stop. He says it started when he was 6. Erik says the reason for the death of his parents was, or he feels anyway, was because Erik told Lyle about the abuse. Lyle didn't know before. And because maybe he thought it stopped with him. He's like, I will not discuss the details of his abuse. Or I think I said I will not discuss the details of his abuse. If you want to know, you can listen. He would say that he didn't want it to stop, which is that's confusing for anyone. I mean, the person who's enduring it. Because it was the only time his father was nice to him. And the only alone time they had. And he says that Jose would threaten him with knives and say, I should kill you and next time I will, which again is explanation for them to say we were living in fear. Lyle says he felt responsible for Erik being assaulted because he made the assault stop with him. Then in turn, it got pushed to Erik. It's not his fault. If he very well could have abused both of them at the same time. This is the monster. He's a monster. Then when all this comes out, the media comes and the jokes are starting and the bullshit that is being said about them and the abuse. Like even Oprah, shame on her, more on her later, to SNL, to JLeno. And then we hear from another cousin. She says Lyle came to her and told, okay, so Lyle went to her and said that him and his dad had been touching each other. She went to Kitty and told her what he told her. And of course, even then, Kitty doesn't believe her. I think she knew. She had to have. She knew that this was happening. And just in order to keep her husband, she let it happen. She's just as bad, in my opinion, as Jose. Erik wanted to go to Stanford, but that is too far away for Jose. And he told him, no, you're not going. You're going to go to UCLA and you're not leaving here. Meanwhile, Lyle was able to go to Princeton. But Lyle wasn't being abused at that point. Erik was. And it was because of that. Because he's thinking, this is a way for me to get away. But Jose wouldn't let him. And that is why he broke down and told Lyle. And obviously Lyle got pissed off. This is his brother. He confronted Jose and he told him he was a sick person. Amen. And you are not touching my brother. Amen. At least someone steps in. He's like, I will call the police and I will tell the entire family who you are. Amen. 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 Jose said, yeah, well, I do what I want to my son and we will forget this conversation. No, you don't get to do whatever you want to your son. You don't get to. You're a sick, sick individual. And I really hope he's rotting in the depths of hell. I really do, personally. This is probably one of the only instances where I do not care if the victim is dead. It doesn't happen very often for me. And it's confusing because I should be siding with the victims. And somewhere in my mind, I do feel Kitty could have been spared. But Jose, nope. And Kitty ends up telling Lyle, of course I know. Do you think I'm stupid? And she did absolutely nothing about it. She's, oh man. Okay. Lyle had a fear at this point that their parents were going to kill them because now they're confronting them on shit, right? They end up getting guns for protection. Of course, these are the guns we'll never see. That night, Lyle thought, it's going to happen. This is it. It's going to happen tonight. He runs upstairs. Both of them load up and go downstairs to the den and start fighting initially. After, or firing, like, I don't know, I think just killing them. After it was done, Lyle hurt his mom and he shot her again. Oh, I don't know, that's horrible. That part was, they then go to the movie theater to buy tickets in order to establish an alibi. Unfortunately, the times all the tickets are not the times that they wanted, which would have taken them out of the vicinity. So that was a waste of time. They end up going back home. And this is when Lyle calls the police. Defense has rest. That's it. They're done. We learn about this theory of imperfect self-defense, which the belief was that this was imperfect self-defense because they felt they were in danger. It's technically not self-defense in the grand scheme of things, but it is self-defense because they feel like they're in danger, even though maybe they might not be. While the, prosecution was closing, saying, well, they could have left. Just like with women, men who are in abusive situations may not always feel like they can. Um, may feel like their life's in danger if they do. That also applies to men. It's just, no, they couldn't have left. Or they felt like they couldn't. They said they didn't have a right, or the prosecution saying they don't have a right to that house, which is true. They didn't. Mm, But that's besides the point. That wasn't the issue here. To this, she believes that the defense was fabricated. So she's basically saying, to this day, is saying, there was no sexual abuse. There was no abuse. It's fine. They were just monsters. They just wanted their money. To this day, when we should be more educated on this subject of men being abused. But apparently, these fools, this fool, this bitch, while deliberating, the men all rest or raise their hands to first degree because as men, they can't understand how this has happened, right? The women believe the abuse was truthful. They tell the judge, we're at an impasse. Like, we can't figure this out. Judge tells them, keep going, keep going. We're going to try to get this. They deliberated for another month, or I think the month in total. They remained deadlocked. So at that, we have a mistrial. And the state decides that they will try the case again, alongside with the death penalty again. And then you had OJ. And I'm going to leave it there. So next week, we'll finish it up, the rest of this doc, as well as what's been happening more recently. Until then, guys, we will talk next week. Bye, everybody.